At Lowell High School. Tara Tawney is here running the camera, and Sam Rinke, who set up the set, is also here. I'm going to be interviewing Gloria Jackson today at 3 o'clock p.m. on June 5th, 2006, at Lowell High School for the Lowell Historical Museum and the Library of Congress's Veterans Historical Project. Mrs. Jackson was born on January 23, 1925, and currently lives at 605 Birchwood Court in Lowell. She was a nurse cadet training in World War II. She trained at Wayne University in Detroit and Percy Jones General Hospital in Battle Creek, as well as others. After she graduated, she worked first at Butterworth Hospital in Grand Rapids and then at Fort Custer in Battle Creek. Let's start with the questions.
Okay.
What were your parents like?
My parents were very nice parents, and my father worked in the foundry and at Wolverine Brass, and my mother was a mother, and she didn't work outside the family, and she took very good care of us.
Do you have any siblings?
Yes, I have 2 sisters and 2 brothers, and they're all living except one brother has passed away.
How did you get along with them?
Good.
Yeah?
We had a few things we wouldn't when they grow up.
What was it like growing up during the Depression?
Well, I started training, so I didn't get involved in gas shortages. I didn't know anything about that, or butter and sugar and things like that. Where I know they were, you just couldn't get them. You'd have to have special things to get them. And when I was in training, we got all of our food taken care of, so that wasn't a problem to us, really.
Where did you live as a child?
At 2907 Coit Road in Grand Rapids.
Where did you go to high school?
Creston High School.
What did you do for fun there?
What, at school?
Either at school or at home, or?
Well, we had to walk 2 miles to school and back, and so I really didn't get involved in too many things, extracurricular things, because it took all my time to get back and forth. And I just had girlfriends, and we'd play game boards and jacks and little things like that.
When did you graduate?
1942.
What were your plans for after high school?
I really didn't have any plans. But it worked out that I got an opportunity to take an entrance exam at Butterworth, and they accepted me, and at that time the government took over and gave all of us the uniforms and paid our way through, and also they gave us a little stipend. We earned a little money.
Tell me how that happened. How did you get involved with the Nurse Cadets?
Well, the way that had it happened was my sister, who was older, she applied to one of the furniture factories where they made, I always have a hard time thinking of these parachutes. And I wasn't 18 years old. I didn't realize you had to be 18 to get into a factory. So there was a girl behind me, and she said, "Come on down to Butterworth." And I work in the diet kitchen, and she said, "You can get a job there." So I did. So that's why I got interested, and this opportunity came along to take the test, and I passed, and the government came through and took care of us.
Why did you join?
I thought it would be a good profession for me to be in, because I didn't know what I wanted to do anyway, and it turned out to be really nice fun.
Do you recall your first days in the Nurse Cadets?
Well, it was just fun meeting all the gals. We had fun, and everybody talked, and it was great.
Just everyone getting acquainted.
Right.
Where did you train?
Well, I started at Butterworth Hospital, signed me up, and then we went to Wayne University for the first 6 months, and then back to Butterworth, and then Wayne University's in Detroit, and then we went back to Grand Rapids, and then later on we went back to Detroit for at Herman Kiefer Hospital, which had a lot of communicable diseases that we don't have now, and that was a really growing experience, and you felt you could do something for these. Like some of the patients were polio patients, and they were in iron lungs, and also there were a lot of tuberculosis, which we're free of now. And then in my last 6 months, I was at Battle Creek, which is Percy Joe, and we took care of paraplegics and everyone that was right off of the field. They would come to Battle Creek, and we would take care of them. And it was a sad experience. It was nice for me to have that opportunity, but I certainly felt a lot of empathy for the young men that were there. That was difficult to see.
Tell me some more about your training experience. What things were your favorite part about it, and what things did you not like? You were saying that sad, not usually
Well, the best parts were like being in contact with a lot of different people and getting to know, and they were very good to us, and we had to really work hard because a lot of the nurses were in the war, and they were really overseas. I liked that in the contact, knowing that I could do something for the patients, and try to be cheerful, and we had a lot of fun, really. And the bad part were the bedpans, because nowadays they get people up, and they can go, and they feel so much better, and they recuperate so much better. But then, that wasn't fun.
Do you remember your instructors?
Yes, I can remember some of them, like Annie Leach was our supervisor at Butterworth, and then during the service we had one little short gal. She's right there. She's Captain Jubb was her name, and the other two, I don't remember their names, but she was the stickler, and she made us toe the mark. The other two were more lenient. But
Where exactly did you work after you graduated from the training?
I worked at Butterworth for a while in the OB department, and then in the nursery, and then I transferred to Fort Custer, which is near Battle Creek, and in the mental part of the hospital where there were soldiers there that had mental problems. And I stayed there for a couple years, and then I was married, and I transferred to a VA hospital in Des Moines, Iowa.
What were your patients like?
Well, they were, of course I had all kinds. With the women, when I worked with the women, they had their babies, and they were really thrilled for that. But they had to stay in bed for 9 days, and then they wouldn't get up. They could dangle their feet at 9 days, and then they'd go home. That was nice they were happy, and of course in the service there were some really young persons there. Some had lost all of their limbs, their 4 limbs, but most of them were good when we were around. I'm sure they had their moments, I know they did, but they did the best they could.
Did you work with any prisoners of war?
Yes, there were a few from Germany at Battle Creek, and they helped in the hospital, and I didn't get to know them too well, but
do Do you know?
As far as I know, they treated him nice.
Yeah, that was my
We had, yeah.
That's what
I, of course, I wasn't there all the time, so I
Yeah.
didn't know. But,
What were the other nurses like?
well, there was all kinds, just like
Mm-hmm.
what you meet in high school and every place else. I just kind of dwell on the fun ones.
Yeah.
And the good-natured and the gals that were always looking on the happy side. But of course, you have moments in your life when you're not happy all the time.
Yeah.
But I would say that was, most of it was nice.
What was a normal day schedule like for you? Either in training
Well,
or...
We would get up early and have to be on duty at 7, and then you'd get off at 2:30. And sometimes I worked nights. I didn't like that too well because I couldn't sleep as well as I should have or could have. But and then when we were off duty, we'd either read or sing or go with girlfriends, or if you had someone to date, you would.
How are things different than they are today in the hospital setting?
In the hospital, well, you don't get the personal contact now. Like, it's difficult to even get a bath in the hospital now. And that was one of the things we had to do. In fact, if you're able, you get up and do things for yourself. And then there's a lot of charting that you have to chart the patients for the day while you're caring for them. And nowadays they don't stay that long, so you don't have to do as much of that. But everything is so technical, you have to be covered financially for lawsuits and things like that. And I don't think there was as much of that.
How did you deal with some of the more traumatizing events that took place in the hospital?
Well, I just tried to do what I had to do, which I was supposed to do, and not think about it after I got off duty as much as I could. Just try to not dwell on the bad things, but you just do it.
How did you stay in touch with your family during training?
Oh, the telephone, and then I would go home when I could. We only got one day off a week, and fortunately, my parents lived in. When I was in Grand Rapids, they lived in New York. Of course, when I was in Detroit and these other towns, we couldn't come home, but I could go home as often as I could.
What was the food like?
At the hospital, or it was always good, especially the pecan rolls and pea soup.
What did you and the other nurses do to entertain yourself at work?
At work
Afterward.
or afterward? Well, just that we would get together and read, or we could play cards, or we could go out shopping down Grand Rapids. We didn't have much money, but we could go look. And we would go to the beach, like Grand Haven or Holland, and lay in the sand and get brown. And we used to lay out on the roof of the nurse's lodge. We had our bathing suits on, but we got really good tans in those days. But now we're not supposed to do those things.
How did your patients entertain themselves while they were in the hospital?
Well, it depends on where. Like if I was in the OB department where the mothers would be there, they'd just talk back and forth, and they couldn't go anyplace, they couldn't do anything. So, and they would. Most of them were real happy there. But in the service, I think the guys would get together as long as they as they could, and just have fun like you have here in high school. But I'm sure they've had their sad days when no one was around.
Tell me about this photograph.
Well, this was taken in around 46, and the war was ending about that time. And this was, there was another picture that was taken, and the same amount of girls were in each picture. So I really don't know how many were there altogether. I just never found out about that, but we did. What we would go out to the park or afterwards when we had time off, and we'd sing on the bus when we were going out to Port Custer, and we just it was a good time for me. And we'd read and have sandwiches at night in the closets. We were supposed to be in bed by 10. Sometimes we would not be in bed by 10. But we were tired, and usually we had to go to bed at 10. So, and then I'd fall asleep when I was dating my husband at the time. He'd come to the nurse's lodge and I'd fall asleep. But anyway.
Can you tell me who in this picture you were close with?
Well, this gal right here, her name is Lorraine Marcus, and she lives in Florida now. And she worked for Dr. Jarvis afterwards, and her husband was a prisoner of war, and she didn't know where he was half the time. But he came okay, and this gal was Dorothy Crawford, and she's still living. I think she was one of the older girls. I think she moved out east. And then this is Lucille Preston from Lowell here. And then this is Ruth Postuma. She's a good friend of mine now, and we still keep in contact. She graduated from the VA hospital too, so she worked for the government.
And this is you, correct?
Yeah, this one is me right there.
Do you have any funny stories from training?
I told you some funny stories. Well, we really had a lot of funny times, but I'll mention this time that this gal, we were walking down the hall and I had a half slip on, and this gal reached up and pulled my slip down to the floor, and we had a big laugh on it. And I don't know, she had so many sayings that this one gal, we would have penicillin, which is an antibiotic, and at that time you'd have to have shots at 12 o'clock at night, 3, 6, 9, all the way around, every 3 hours. And she'd say, a shot in the dark or penicillin at midnight. And it was fun most of the time. Well, one time we had a little excitement. We had a dark room and there was oxygen in there. This was afterwards at the VA hospital in Des Moines. And they had oxygen tanks in this room. And there was an elderly gentleman who was smoking. Everybody smoked in those days, and he threw the cigar in the sink. But it wasn't. No one got hurt or anything. But that was kind of exciting. That's all.
What were holidays like during training?
Well, we all, if we worked, we just enjoyed. They always had a special meal, like you always do for Christmas or Thanksgiving and things like that. And then if I wasn't working, I'd go home if I was home. But we always celebrated holidays.
Did you have any vacations?
You would get, I think, a week's vacation a year.
What did you do with
But
that?
I probably went home. Just we didn't travel too much in those days because, well, gas was short and not everybody had cars. In fact, there were very few cars, and we didn't have all these telephones that the kids have now.
Do you recall the day the war ended?
Yes, I remember, and I was in Grand Rapids, and all of us went down to Monroe, and there weren't any cars running, and we were out in the streets, and we were just tickled like if you won a football game or something. But
How did you personally react?
to the war being, well, I thought it was great, but I was young and I didn't understand all of the factions that a war meant. I knew it was horrible for our military and everything, but I don't think I had the moxie to know exactly how this affected the world, and everything else until I was older. But at the time, I was naturally happy that the
Where
guys
were
would
you?
come home. I was here in Grand Rapids.
And like, what were you doing? You were at Barber?
I was at Barber. Yeah.
What did you do in the days and weeks after you left training?
Well, I went down to get this job at the factory, at that furniture factory, and I did take care of a little boy while his mother worked. But then I got the job in the dye kitchen at Butterworth and in the cafeteria. So that's what I did.
Did you make any close friendships in the nurse cadet corps that you kept in contact with?
Yes,
You mentioned-
quite a few, and posted them, and there's a gal from, well, there's quite a few here in Grand Rapids that are still here, and we do get together, but not all the time. And I think there's been about 3 or 4 that have passed away, but we only had, I think it was 17 or 19 in our class that graduated. In our particular February class, there were 3 classes of girls, a June class and a September class, and then this was the February class. But it's just getting, you know how it is to plan things. It takes one person to get with it, and we'll get together again, I know, because we got together about 3 years ago. And then the alumni calls, and
Yeah.
sometimes they do that.
How did your experiences affect your views on war and the military in general?
I don't like war, but I wish that we could have more diplomatic answers for our differences. And I don't like it right now, the way things are going, which is in '06. I think we should honor what we are doing, and we should be fighting for our country when we're supposed to be doing it. I think we've got to stick up for ourselves and have people that will go to war for us. And that's what we've had to do in World War II, and that's what we have to do.
How did your experiences affect your life?
Oh, I think it made me more of a person that could understand how it is to be a patient. As I get older, I understand that I have more empathy for the families and for the patients, because it affects everyone, their friends, their moms and dads, and the whole life process. And I'm thankful that I did go to training and could, because it's been really educational and a lot of experiences I wouldn't have had.
Well, thank you very much for helping
Well,
us.
it's nice working with you guys.
The following oral military history project is a series of documentaries in association with the Lowell area men and women who proudly served and sacrificed part of their lives to preserve the opportunities for all of us to build our businesses and raise our families under a blanket of freedom. For reservations and more information, contact the Lowell Area Historical Museum at 616-897-7688.